everybody. I am Melissa Forziat. I'm a keynote speaker and the host of this Halt and Catch Fire rewatch podcast. Now, when I speak, my topic is something that I call Take the Doughnut, which for me is another way to say Carpe Diem. It's all about going after the things you want in life. Now, something I wanted to do this year was watch the show Halt and Catch Fire again, but this time talk about it with other humans, which is such a novelty for me. And we've up-leveled that because now I'm getting a chance to talk with people who worked on the show. And before I introduce today's guest, just a really quick housekeeping item. If you are brand new to the show and you want spoiler-free coverage up until the episode you're on, go to the episode recaps. Those are safe for you. But these interviews could be spoiler-filled. We can talk about anything that happens in any episode of the show. So just be aware of that up front, especially because today I'm very excited to talk with Joe Dinicol, who played Craig Bosch for 3 episodes of season 3. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you so much for having me.
So glad that you could be here. I have a ton of questions for you. But I should probably start where I often start, which is asking, what was the process for you to get onto the show to begin with?
I mean, like anything else, it was an audition. I had auditioned for something earlier in the run of the show and didn't get it. And then this came up, and the casting directors were fans of mine and brought me in. And I believe one of the showrunners had liked my audition for the thing before, and then I got this part. So I wish it was a better story, but just auditioning like anything else.
But I do think that's an optimistic story, because I think sometimes we just think of rejection as rejection, but then it was actually the road to the acceptance later. It was the road to the role.
Yeah, I mean, the show business it's a long life, right? So like you'll run into people and they'll go, "Oh no, I remembered you from this other thing, and that wasn't the right thing," and you might not have even gotten that note at the time that you had even done well, and then things come back around. I've been doing this professionally for 30 years. And so, you have those moments where either you run into someone and they go, "Oh, I really wanted you for that thing," and you had no idea, or something else comes up. That's happened a couple of times, and it's always really nice.
Yeah. Well, in a way, it's all part of the journey with this show, I guess, because you were a fan. You had tried for a role before, you didn't get it, but you had been watching the show.
Oh, yes.
And I'm curious for you, what impact did that have when you actually booked the role and started working on the show, having been a fan?
I mean, I think it's kind of the dream, right? Like I get into this very honestly. Like, I just love theater and movies and TV shows. I'm a big fan, kind of first and foremost. I mean, I love performing, but as much as I want to express myself and put my art into the world, I want it to have an effect. I want people to feel something. I want to be in something that makes people feel the way I felt when I watched Back to the Future, or Ferris Bueller's Day Off, or Rushmore, any of these things that I love. And so to get to be on something that I love, it's kind of surreal, and it makes it feel worth it. Because you get to be a part of something that intrinsically makes you feel something. And so it was a real thrill to come on that set, and we were chatting a little bit before, but to also get to tell the people on the show that I was a fan, because I think they didn't get a lot of that. The show is very good, and obviously it went for 4 seasons and it was successful in that way, but I think they felt a little in a vacuum doing the show. And so when anyone was a fan of it, they worked really hard. They rehearsed on the weekends. They were real pros, and they really loved the show themselves. And so when someone came on and said, "Hey, I'm actually a big fan," I think it was a big thrill for them.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. And, to go even further in this direction, as a fan, you would have had a lot of time sitting with these characters watching the show.
Sure.
And then now all of a sudden you're acting opposite these people. So, you had a chance to work especially a lot with Mackenzie Davis, with Carrie Boucher, with a bit with Toby Huss, maybe a little with Scoot McNairy, maybe a little bit with some of the other coders.
Yes.
A little.
Yes.
All of those were people that you would have maybe seen on screen.
Yeah.
As you were watching the show previously, but now you're in scenes with them. So how did your opinion of those characters shift when you went from thinking as a fan to thinking as Craig?
I mean, I think it more shifted because of the way that show evolved. One of the cool things about that show is that every season there's a big nothing is stagnant. They're making leaps in time, they're going forward in time, and people are changing. I think especially Mackenzie's character goes through such an evolution in terms of where she starts out in that show and where she was even by the time I got there. It was really surprising, even just reading the scripts and seeing what we were doing together, because it was a much more mature, a softer character. Like there was a lot less chaos in that character. She was really evolving, and so it was I think it was helpful in that I wasn't coming onto the show I had already seen. It was already new and different, and so it put me a little at ease to be like, oh, I'm not trying to play catch up. This is new for them too. This is all these characters are evolving all the time, and those of us who come into play for a couple episodes are sort of helping to push that forward. But it was nice to be able to have an affection for the characters. I mean, certainly Mackenzie's character. Mackenzie is just a phenomenal performer, and the character is very interesting. And then to come in and play a character who's sort of affectionate with her it just made it very easy, because I already sort of have that affection for that character and her as a performer.
Yeah. You mentioned how long you've been working in this industry. You've
Yeah.
been part of a lot of TV shows, a lot of films.
Mhm.
What do you remember specifically about being on this set, on shooting Halt and Catch Fire? What sticks out to you as different about this particular show?
Well, I'll say there was a scene, I can't remember which episode it's in. Maybe it's in our first episode, where we're all sitting around. It's me and the other Joe, and Toby, and maybe Annabeth Gish was in that scene. I can't remember,
That sounds
but
right.
it's a scene where we're sort of like negotiating. They're trying to take us over, and we're negotiating. And we came in and we rehearsed that scene a dozen times before even the crew came in. It was a really collaborative and exploratory process. So it felt, coming off of shows that have to work a lot quicker, that have maybe an action piece or special effects or things that aren't about the performance. What felt very different was that this show lived and died on its performances. Obviously there's an aesthetic to it, but it really understood that these scenes are only interesting if the actors are interesting in them. And so I remember taking a lot of time going over and over, throwing out the blocking, trying something new, and that just doesn't happen on a lot of sets. Usually you're coming in, you block, the director probably has an idea of where you should stand based on what will be the most expedient way to shoot the thing. Like, there's a lot of stuff that has nothing to do with actors, and that's fine. That's what it is. But to come on a set where they want everybody's input and they want it to feel organic and they want it to feel like a scene. They want it to feel like something that's really happening, as opposed to, well, we just got to get this on film. I remember being really taken aback by that.
That's exciting to hear.
Yeah.
When I was sort of prepping for this, I looked and I had to sort of blink my eyes because I thought you were only in 3 episodes, because to me, Craig and Doug have such an impact on the show.
Oh,
Like
cool.
what the show is before you're on it, and then what
Mhm.
happens after you leave.
Right.
Whoa.
Oh, interesting.
And so I really wanted to sit with that for a second. What did you understand about Craig, or about Craig's trajectory,
Mm.
when you booked the role?
I mean, I knew that it was these 3 episodes. I didn't know if it would be more or less. I knew that regardless of what ended up happening, that he was a catalyst emotionally for her to open up a little bit, which was really satisfying to play and to be a part of in that way. Because again, these characters evolve a lot, and so to be a small part of that is cool. But I certainly didn't know if it was going to continue. I think on a show like this, it's such a character study of these sort of 4 or 5 people, I guess, the sort of core group, that you really are in service of that. And so, if more was, I think it's kind of interesting that we get fired off screen, that we're there to sort of plant a wedge, and that's it. And for her and I to have that moment of softness and vulnerability. But really, that's your job, right? Is to kind of help these characters grow. That's what supporting characters on a TV show are. It's not really about us. And so I understood that I maybe could go a little longer, but ultimately I actually kind of like that we came in and did what we were supposed to do, and then they get to move on.
I mean, kind of right after your run on the show ends, it's sort of cataclysmic. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like I had you gotten more episodes, I don't even know how that would have happened,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
everything shifts so dramatically almost
Yeah.
immediately after Craig and Doug are fired.
Right.
Let's talk about some of the scenes and some of the specific episodes
Mm.
that you were in. So the first episode was 303, which is flipping the switch. And you started to
Mhm.
talk about working on this scene a little bit, but
Yeah.
we're going to see Boz and Diane, who are meeting for the very first time
Yeah.
themselves. They go to Swap Meet, which is your company,
Mhm.
because they want to tender an offer to buy Swap Meet and basically merge it into Mutiny.
Yeah.
And when they get to your office, they see that it was kind of oversold. It was maybe the picture of what Swap Meet was
Yeah.
painted a little bit more beautifully than it actually is.
Yeah.
And they show up, they ask to take a tour, and these scenes are deliciously uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So just generally speaking, what was it like doing those scenes and facing off against Toby and Annabeth, probably as the first work that you did on the show?
Yeah, I mean, luckily both of those people as human beings are two of the nicest human beings on the planet. I mean, Annabeth Gesh is such a powerhouse performer, and just the most sort of down to earth, real actor, real fun. And then Toby is like, he's like a carnival barker. I mean, he's such an entertaining and lovely human being. We ended up hanging out quite a bit off screen, and he's kind of performing all the time in the best way possible. And again, just actors who really want to get into it and work, no egos, just kind of best idea wins. And so, coming on to a show is I think the sort of I worked on Grey's Anatomy for a little bit, and one of the hardest jobs in show business is like the one-off guest star. I mean, we got a little running, a little runway on our stuff because we were in a couple of episodes, but coming in and having to deliver on a set that is not yours, that and on a show like Grey's, people are coming in playing my daughter is gonna die, or they're playing major things, and everyone is new to them. It's a show that's been on. It's a tough job, and so to work with actors and directors that really make it feel like, no, we're all just actors trying to figure out a scene. That's all that this is. Made it a lot easier. And then any discomfort you have coming onto the set, you just put it in the scene, as you said. Very, very uncomfortable stuff.
Perfect scene to put it into, really.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And actually, when I was dissecting those scenes, because it's a sort of a series of scenes, it was really fun to see the nuances between those two pairings, because we get Boz and Diane, who again, they're meeting for the very first time, but they're more seasoned professionals. They're a bit older. They don't really have a reason to have a shorthand with each other, but they kind of do, and they have a certain innate chemistry that we're finding. So we've got that. And then they're facing off against Craig and Doug, who have a more established partnership, but they're newer to the scene. They're younger, certainly have less experience in business. And in this particular situation, I would say Diane and Boz come out on top by a lot. And so talk to me about the Craig and Doug partnership. What were their strengths? What were their weaknesses?
I mean, I think their strengths are that they have a long history with each other. I think they really know each other, and have great affection for each other. But I think at the end of the day, I always saw it as that they got pretty lucky and they hit on something that someone wanted to buy. I think Doug was was sort of the bullish business type, and I think that Craig was, the sort of quote unquote brains behind the tech of it. But I think he was Salieri is the wrong thing, but I think when he meets Mackenzie's character, I think he knows his limitations, right? And I think he's even accepted that. I think when they come in, he wants to make some money, or maybe join something that is better than his abilities, and maybe learn something. And Doug wants to be in charge, but I think they hit on something kind of by accident and got pretty lucky. And I think Craig sees that, and I think Doug doesn't. I think Doug thinks that they deserve the accolades and the money and all this stuff, and Craig's going like, let's take this and run. Like let's use this as a springboard. But in terms of their partnership, I think they just, I think they grew up together. I think they've probably become very different people since that time, but they have great affection for each other, and they're going to stick by one another.
Yeah, it's really interesting because as you were talking about that, a new thought occurred for me that Craig might be the opposite of Ryan in season 3, because Ryan, who
Right.
starts with Mutiny, you don't have
Mhm.
scenes with him, but he eventually moves
Yeah.
on to work with Joe. He's so talented.
Yeah.
Um, we don't get to see who's more talented, Cam or Ryan, but we
Right.
know that Cam has a respect for Ryan's abilities,
Right.
that he is terrible with people and
Right.
he has not a deft touch in his fingers to
Yes.
deal with humans. And so the way you
Yes.
just described Craig sounds to me like what we're actually seeing is the opposite of
Yes.
a character we're seeing in other scenes. um
Yes.
that's super interesting. So um one question I have before we kind of move on from that episode is
Mm.
that swap meet office location. We
Yeah.
only see it once.
Yeah.
So where were you actually physically? Were you on location at an office?
Yeah,
Were you
yes, it was like an abandoned office, basically. Yeah, that was a fully on location. They just found I'm sure Atlanta is changing rapidly, but at that time, the tax incentives and the influx of people filming there, it was pretty new. And so there was a lot of space, like when people start filming somewhere, you go, oh, there's all this, like, we've got all these, like, I used to shoot a show in Vancouver, and there's all these abandoned buildings, like all these like big warehouse type buildings, which are great for filming in. And so I think that's kind of what they used, as opposed to building a thing for a one-off. It was just a location.
Yeah, okay, interesting. So if we move on to the next episode, so 304, this is Rules of Honorable Play. We're going to
Mhm.
see uh, Doug and Craig both have independent interactions with Cam, and
Mhm.
they have wildly different outcomes in that
Yeah.
process. Doug and Cam are like oil and water, but
Yes.
Craig has a lot, well, it seems that he has a lot more success with Cam
Yeah.
initially. So what do you think? You started to talk a little bit about it in your previous answer, but what
Mhm.
do you think Craig's impression is of Cam?
I think he knows she's a genius. I mean, I think that probably his, I've run into this in show business. Over the years, you see whether it's actors or directors, and you go, "Oh, you're actually a producer." Like you see talent, and you bring people together. I think someone like Craig is probably in the wrong job. I think he sees talent. I think he's good with people. He's a mediator. He can calm people down, and he has genuine affection for talented people. And so I think when he meets Cam, on top of probably having a bit of a crush on her, I think he just sees the talent and respects it. And there's that scene where they butt heads about the coding, and he says, well, you should do it, it's perfect, you just do it the way you want. Like, that's you're the one you're the one who's going to become famous at doing this. It's not me. And he realizes that, and he has some enough humility to realize that. And I think that's his real skill. It's not coding, and it's, you know, it's being able to see talent in others, I think.
Mm.
And Doug is kind of the opposite. Doug has no idea what his limitations are. Doug thinks he's a great businessman, but he's not. And thinks that Craig is better at coding, but he's not. You know, I think he gets a lot of it kind of wrong because of his ego.
Let's get into this even more. And there's a really interesting nuance that happens in this episode, because I think it's going one way, and then there's this detail that pops in that is so rich and interesting to me. So to set this up, we're going to get a fascinating conversation between Craig and Cam over a bottle of wild turkey in Boz's office.
Yes.
And like you were just talking about, he asks her, why do you not want to change your original block of code?
Yeah.
Like, why are you digging your heels in on this? And she explains it. He hears her out. He agrees, like you said, that she shouldn't change it. He also encourages her to go to Texas. She makes a big personal reveal to him. And he says, go to Texas, get your dad's bike. That's a very, like, a personal thing. She hasn't been sharing a lot of personal information with people. We're later going to find out, after Craig's not there, she softens on both of these points. She's going to change a bit of her code. She's going to go to Texas and she's going to go to Texas to try to get her dad's bike, whether or not it actually happens. So all of that seems like it's heading in a certain direction for me. But then we're going to find out in a dinner meeting that Cam misses. So there's a dinner meeting between Diane and Donna, Craig and Doug. And we find out that Craig has actually told the group, all of the people at the table, some amount of the conversation that he just had with Cam.
Yeah.
And this makes me wonder what's going on with Craig. Is he in that moment genuinely relating to Cam, or is he actually in some way manipulating Cam?
Interesting. I mean, I'm trying to remember the show now. You know, I think that he is being relating with her, and I think human beings are very complicated, and I think he's in a precarious position, and when given the opportunity to, you know, information is very powerful, and people, I mean, you'll see people tell people secrets. It's information is much more powerful than we give it credit for. And I think he's sitting at a dinner with his bosses, and he buckles. I don't think he doesn't have any leverage, right? And so they don't need him to code. They've got his company. And so he's trying to, you know, keep his head above water, and he does something that I bet he later feels not so super proud of, you know, because I think he does have a lot of affection for Cam, but he also knows she doesn't need him. And so it's I don't think it's necessarily one thing or the other. I think that's what's really interesting about this show is, and I think probably best encapsulated in Lee Pace's character, which is that, like, you can be hurt and vulnerable and traumatized and have a beautiful heart and be a piece of shit. Like, I think that both of those things can be true, you know, and that people are complicated. And so I think he is. I mean, I certainly, when I was playing it, I felt that he was really connecting with her, but then also realizes that, like, she doesn't need him, and so he's doing his best to save his own ass, basically, you know?
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. That puts a lot of context to it. I mean, we don't really know how much he says. We know, I think it's Diane that's like, I thought you said that you had a good conversation with Cam.
Yeah.
I can't imagine, though, that Doug would have heard something like that and not probed, you know?
Yes.
Like, I feel like probably more than that came out.
Right.
But I think that makes a lot of sense how you explain that.
Right.
You know, to dig into something that you said a little bit earlier, because you made a really interesting comment earlier in the same conversation that Cam and Craig have. She asks if he's ever thought about breaking off from Doug. And So later, Craig's going to come to her. He's thought about it a bit. He comes around to her side of the desk.
Yeah.
He gets really close to Cam. She kind of shrinks away from that. And he
Yeah.
types onto her computer, might be into going solo. I love Doug, but we're not on the same page. Discuss after dinner with Diane. What do you think? First of all, what do you think his intentions were here?
I think he's trying to see if that was if that was an offer or a piece of advice. I think um again, I think he's a loyal guy, but he also he wants a partnership. And so is she saying you should get rid of him and come work with me? Or is she saying you should get rid of him because neither of you guys are really up to this? And so I think getting rid of him is maybe worth it if there's some sort of future where he can actually be a part of something. I think that like in defending him, I guess like and I because I feel like this too. And it's interesting we talk about this show, which is a show I was not maybe as big a part of as I have been of others, but I grew up in the theater, right? And in the theater, you're a part of something. Some nights you play Hamlet and some nights you carry a spear, right? But you're a part of something. That's what this is really about. It's not a solo sport, and you want to be a part of something. And I think that as you get older and as people change, and I've had this in creative partnerships as well, you reach and you see it in friendships. You get to a point where you go, we've done what we can do as friends. We've grown into different people, and we can't. We're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole now. It doesn't work anymore. And I think he's at that point with Doug, and he's exploring his options. He's going, well, I'm not gonna fuck over my best friend for nothing. But if there's a real opportunity to grow and be a part of something, that might be worth sitting him down and going, hey, I think we've reached our limit and I'm going to go and do this. I'm sorry. I wish you the best. I'm glad we sold the company, yada, yada, yada. But I think he's testing the waters to see, is there a real future here? Because I don't want to sell out my best friend because you think he's a bad guy. I would maybe think about selling him out if you thought I was worth something. But I think he's trying to figure that out.
This is so interesting. So, Craig can't really know this, but what do you ultimately think makes Cam want to fire both Doug and Craig?
I think that she probably doesn't uh she doesn't respect his bailing on his partner. I think that's she never wanted Doug, right? I think she was sussing out to see like does this Craig guy bring anything to the table? I think he likes her romantically, and I don't think she's into it. And so I think that's a part. I think it's like it almost worked. Like this guy, he was sweet and he was vulnerable, but he also like he was kind of willing to sell out his best friend. And he's not, like I think about this when I see people act poorly on a set. My first thought is, are they talented enough to act like that? Not that anyone is talented enough to be awful to anybody, but there is that thought of like, there's stories of Marlon Brando being difficult or this person or that person. And you go, well, on the waterfront's pretty good, but like, and then there's some people you're like, you're not talented enough to act like this. And I wonder if that's how she felt about Craig, that she was like, he was sweet and he was pretty good at what he does, but not good enough to be like that. And Cam is, as far as I can tell, is with a lot of walls up looking for family, and that's a tough road when you have that many walls up, but what you want are collaborators and family. It makes the test to get in very difficult. And I think her part of the show is about the people who do get in, that at various times and then fall out and then come back, but that people want to be in business with her and in life and in business. And so, but she's got all these sort of tests for people to pass, and Craig doesn't pass.
Holy cow, I'm loving every second of this. I have a follow-up question on that, but I want to interrupt this with like a small technical question.
Yes.
So when you are in this scene typing into the computer and we're watching the words come up.
Yeah.
What are you seeing anything on screen? Or is that something that's added in post
No,
later?
I believe I typed it.
Okay.
That it's just that it's, you know, sometimes these things are easier to do in post and sometimes they're not. My understanding was it's been a while, but I think it was just like a word processor basically that I just wrote it.
Okay. All right.
And maybe for the close up, someone else who could type faster wrote it. I don't really
Well, that's the thing.
remember.
I mean, for me, I'm like backspacing all the time to correct my
Yeah. I'm a
mistakes.
pretty
It's like-
fast typer, so I can't remember. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I just did it, I think. Yeah.
Okay, cool. You said so many good things there, and I want to look at the romantic side of it a little bit more, because it certainly reads to me that we have been seeing in season 3 all of these little moments, all these little signs that Cam's still thinking about Tom. They're not huge moments, but she's checking to see if he's logged on to Mutiny. She's like doing all, like, people are afraid to mention Tom in the room. Somebody does mention Tom in the room. Everybody's like, oh my God. So we know that he's not gone.
Yes.
But Craig couldn't possibly know that. So,
No.
you know, I think it's a really interesting dynamic. And then I see Craig and Cam, and I think they've got chemistry.
Yeah.
Especially in this scene over the bottle of wild turkey. And especially because the camera is really focusing on your face for a lot of what she's saying.
Sure,
so
yeah.
we feel like we're getting a connection to Craig. And so all of that's happening. But ultimately, like, Kim's gonna go to Texas and she's gonna go retrieve Tom, and kind of right after this episode that we were just talking about.
Yeah.
So you as a fan, having seen season 2, knowing a little bit about Tom.
I also know Mark quite well.
And knowing Mark.
Yeah, I know Mark. He's such a great
like,
guy, great performer. I mean, yeah.
I mean, how does that play in to how you read those scenes between Cam and Craig, as a person, not as Craig?
I mean, I think it's twofold. I think, like, as the performer, you like, I'm thinking of what Craig wants, right? And Craig likes her and doesn't know anything about Tom, right? He has no idea about the context. You know, I think that there's a trap in sort of trying to figure out too much context when that stuff I wouldn't know, right? And then as a fan of the show and not as the performer, I go, well, I think Craig kind of reminds her of Tom, and he's not as good. You know, he's like, or to her, you know, he's not, she's still thinking about him. Here's this guy who is a coder. He's good at what he does. He openly likes her, you know, and all these are things that are sort of reminiscent of what she had with Tom and couldn't handle, or whatever. I can't fully remember how that sort of goes down at the end of the second season, but I think she's probably going, well, if I'm going to be with a guy like this, I'm going to be with Tom. That's who she wants. And I think in reading it, I became sort of the reminder for her of that, or the avatar for him in that way, to remind her about her connection with him.
Yeah. I want to ask one more general thing about your scene work. You know, so in 305, which is Yerba Buena, Cam goes MIA for basically a week. She's in Texas, goes to get her dad's bike, but actually gets Tom. And during this time, there's a really big thing that's happening at Mutiny, where the user base is sort of demanding that they be able to pay for goods with dollars, or with actual money, not just with swaps. And Doug and Craig have some code ready for that. They need to do some tweaking to it. They need to test it, but they've got it. Cam wants to custom build a solution, and she says, hang on till I get back. And then goes missing for a while. And this is really going to, this conflict, it's just like one of the last really big spotlights we're going to get on the divide between them before it just all bursts open. when you think about the scenes that you were playing in, how much, and knowing that it's going to escalate so quickly between Donna and Cam, how much was the discussion of what was supposed to underpin the scenes?
Sorry, in terms of
Like in terms of general objectives, because like
mm,
your characters coming in, Doug and Craig are coming in,
yeah,
and we need to get from point A to point B.
yes,
And Doug and Craig and swap meet is a really quick road from point A to point B.
yes.
Um, so what kind of objectives overall were you given in terms of what was supposed to be happening in these scenes?
I mean, I think and this is just good writing. I think that we sort of Doug and Craig sort of exacerbate the, as far as I can remember, the sort of the rift between Donna and Cam, which is that like this is great and cool. It's like the Social Network. It's like it's got to be cool, but it's also got to make money. Like and I think they bring these guys in who aren't visionaries and have no real desire to be visionaries. They want to work somewhere. They want to have a future and a career and a life, and I think they're the outside eye that goes, well, yeah, we got to monetize this. We'll do this. We're ready to go. And it sort of heightens as far as I can remember, the rift between Don and Cam. So there was not really talk of objectives any more than just we're trying to show our value, right? We're in this new company and we go, oh, well, we can fix it. She screwed off and we can fix this problem. And it highlights, I think, an issue that they have between the two of them, between the artist and the business head of the company, And so that's that again, like I said, characters are brought into a TV show, especially a character study like this show is, to poke and prod at problems in these dynamics, right? You're brought in to kind of to highlight an issue that people are having, and we are the wedge between Donna and Cam. That Donna goes, well, these guys want to do business. They want to make this a business, and they want to be efficient, and they're not. I think part of the scene with Craig and Cam about the coding is for us to see like Craig's not precious about the code, and that there's a beauty in that as well. There's a compromise and a thing that for all of us to work together, we have to have that compromise, and he's not precious about it. And that is of value to someone like Donna, right? Whereas it's not of value necessarily to Cam.
Yeah. What do you think happened for Craig after Mutiny?
I mean, I'd like to think like I wrote a note to Cantwell, I think Rogers. I can't remember one of the creators when I watched the series finale, and I won't be a spoiler about it, but what happens to Lee Pace's character I thought was really beautiful. I think that, and I didn't see it coming, and it's the and in the best moves in any film or TV show, it felt inevitable. I had no idea it was going to happen, and it felt inevitable. I think best case scenario, something like that. I think he finds that his talents actually lie elsewhere, that coding is not really what he's good at, and that he wants to connect with people. I think that scene with the wild turkey is that he's desperate. I would imagine when you're working in coding in the 80s, you're not connecting with a lot of people. That's not there's a big people aren't hugely social, I don't think. And so I think best case scenario, I think he probably went and ran a company like that, wasn't the coder, but that he brought talented people together, that he went out and found another Cam, backed her, and built a company, and also probably did part ways with Doug, at least professionally. And when I got to go figure out what I'm going to do now, because this didn't work and this isn't working. You and I are very different, and the things I value, you don't value. And so, yeah, I think best case scenario, they split up and he went and became Donna, or became Lee Pace's character in later seasons. I think that's kind of the best case scenario.
That sounds like a really good fit for Craig. What were
Yeah.
some of your favorite moments on set?
I mean, like I said, that first scene we had with Toby and Annabeth, working with actors like that is it's much rarer than it should be. There's not a lot of shows like this. TV is a lot about plot now. And character studies are not, they just don't, maybe we don't have the attention span for them. I certainly do. I'm sure you do. But really sitting in a room and hashing out a scene, whether you're the star of the show or the guy coming in for a couple of episodes, and really hashing it out, really taking everything away and going, what is this scene and what's the best way to do it? That's what we do this for. That's what I do this for. That's the best part of the job, you know. So that, and the wild turkey scene with Mackenzie, working with an actor of her presence and ability one on one is really special. It's again, a lot of especially acting in TV. Like I said, I grew up in the theater, and the theater is our medium. It's about us. We sit in a rehearsal hall, and at the end of the day, it's just us up there on stage. But in television, it's not really about us. It's about the writing and it's about the technical aspect of it. So to do a show like this and have moments where it really feels like it's about the acting is really special. It's really lucky, and it's quite rare. And so I would say I would say those kind of two really stick out. Mostly just working with actors like that.
Yeah. So with that in mind, you worked with a number of people on the cast and the crew for this show. Is there
Mhm.
anybody that maybe didn't come up during this conversation that you want to shout out, people that you really enjoyed working with, or maybe unsung heroes, or maybe they're some heroes? Like, who
Uh,
comes to
you know,
mind?
Manish, who played what's his name?
Ryan.
I met him the first day we rode from the airport together, and we really hit it off. And I didn't have any scenes with him, and kind of we hit it off, and then I just didn't really see him again until I watched the show. And I think he's so good in the show. He's such a special performer. I kind of wish I'd ever gotten to tell him that. I just like, he's a really lovely guy, and I'd never seen his work before. And I didn't really know much about what his trajectory would be, and so I didn't have much contact with him. And then I watched the show, and I think he's incredible. So that's someone I would love to talk about, because he's and Lee Pace, who again I didn't really have anything to do with and met very briefly, but I mean, I was sort of obsessed with that character when I watched the show. I just think he's such an incredible actor, and that's such an interesting character, that they really use him and mine all that stuff with. It's pretty remarkable.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that you shouted them out. So, as we sort of wrap up here, I know
Mhm.
it's a strange time in your
Mhm.
industry, but is there anything that you've been working on that's coming out, or anything that you've worked on recently that you want
Yeah.
people to go check out?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I during the sort of the latter part of the pandemic, I started making producing and acting in movies with some friends. And so we have a movie called Bring It All Back Home, which is sort of did a couple festivals and is looking for distribution. And then we shot one last fall, which is being edited and put together, called Body in the Trunk, which is kind of a cool, dark thriller. So yeah, I spent time doing producing very low budget movies, and figuring out what that's like. And then I'm doing a play here in LA and Pasadena in October, a play called Art, which is a great French play that's been translated about three friends. One of them buys a piece of art that is basically just a white canvas, and they argue about art for an hour. So I'm doing that in October. So yeah. So it's a weird time, but like anything else, you figure out how to keep going.
Absolutely. I mean, thank you so much for this, and actually
My
hang out with me
pleasure.
for just a minute after,
Yeah.
because I have something I want to share with you
Okay.
about
Yeah.
the project that's working on a place to be released.
Okay.
But I mean, it's been such a blast talking with
Oh
you
my God, my
about Craig.
pleasure. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for reaching out. And I'm glad you're doing this. Like I told you, I was such a big fan of the show before being on it, and so it's just cool to see it get recognition. You know, I think it's regardless of my part of it, notwithstanding, I think it's such a great show, and it's really cool that you're doing this. So thank you for reaching out.
Oh, thank you for that and for being part of this oral history that's getting created for this
Yeah.
show. And to everybody who's watching this, please go out there and watch Halt and Catch Fire. Bye, everybody.